As promised in my last video on the Black Limbus sofa table, here's the combination workhorse made from a single 2x12. This is designed from a traditional saw bench, including dog holes for securing work with bench dogs or holdfasts, and a bird's mouth on one side for rip or cross-cutting boards. In case you're unfamiliar, I'm also the director of the Katz-Moses Woodworkers with Disabilities Fund, and this is going to be a part of our Build 'em initiative, so here's Jonathan with a little more on that.
Hi, I'm Jonathan Katz-Moses. A couple of years ago, I started the Katz-Moses Woodworkers with Disabilities Fund, which is a nonprofit that aims to help people with mental, physical, and combat-related disabilities get the resources they need to grow their hobby, craft, and passion. Now, we all can relate to the fact that completing a project is one of the most healing and rewarding things that you can do. Now, we have a lot of reach, and with our director, Chris Giffro from Dogcraft Cowworks, or is it Cowdog Craftworks?
Really?
Well, regardless, doesn't matter. We are going to put together an initiative called the Work Holding Initiative. Now, we need your help in a lot of ways. There will be links to my video down below, or a charity page. We need to raise money for lifts, for these electric lifts that we're going to use for our gantry cranes. We are creating a set of step-by-step build plans for several projects, including the one you're watching now, a gantry crane. We're doing a lot of exciting things, but even more exciting than that is we've created a semi-autonomous computer application system that allows people with disabilities to apply, as well as people who want to help them. We're going to be able to connect thousands of people all across the world with people who need help and those who want to help. So if you want to learn more, check out the links below in the pinned comment and description. And we're going to let Dogcraft Cowworks here, what was it again?
Crop Dust Works.
It doesn't matter. We're going to let him get back to his build. But guys, thank you so much for your support. I really couldn't do this without you. And we really appreciate you joining us on this journey to help those who need it most.
Thanks for that, Jonathan. The joinery for the legs to the bench surface is Arikata-san Hozo, a Japanese through single dovetail, which I've done at an angle. In the plans, we'll also have a straight leg version with a basic lap joint for those who don't wish to be so hard on themselves. So this is a pretty normal knuckle-headed move for me, but as I was just kind of double checking here, it sort of dawned on me that my shoulders are cut a little bit too shallow. So as I'm just kind of test fitting here where my dovetail sits, the face of my dovetail is sitting flush with the surface. However, because it's at that 10-degree angle, it's kind of kicking down a little bit. Really, there's a number of different ways I can solve this, but I think the simplest thing is that I'm just going to take my mini sashigane and drop a mark that is going to be off of my shoulder. That puts me probably, I don't know, 3/8 to a 1/2 inch down all along, and then once this is proud, I can just plane that flush after the fit. A fairly simple principle I adhere to in building any project is to try and avoid math as much as possible. Now, we'll have build plans available for this on CAPS' website, but here you can see that I'm basically locking in angles with a bevel gauge and creating uniform spacing to keep everything consistent through the layout process. That ensures that number one, I'm not fiddling around with numbers for each component, and rather I'm creating a pattern that'll be repeated on each leg location. Now, as far as order of operations goes, when you are sawing an angled joint, really of any kind, I always like to start on the high side. And the reason being that I don't really like the idea of not knowing where this backside is. As far as your baseline is concerned, you want to preserve your baselines as much as possible and you don't want to cross them. So here you can start from this side, get to your baseline, and then worry about getting to 90, and then when you flip the board, you'll be able to get to your opposing baseline, which is tilted down in a very clean manner. This is a technique I've demonstrated a few times in my videos by now. This is kigoroshi, whereby the user will compress the wood fibers by peening it down with a hammer. After the components are fit, the joint is wet to cause the wood to re-expand in the joint to ensure an extremely snug fit. Traditionally, this is done without any adhesives. However, since I want this to be a permanent connection, I'll be using some basic yellow glue, which has a bit of water in it to create adhesion and deliver a similar effect. Angle glue-ups are always particularly annoying. I did the whole CA glue and blue tape trick here to try and have two parallel surfaces for clamping. However, I still have not had great success with the clamping calls not sliding around in this method. It has nothing to do with the glue itself, but typically the tape ends up failing on me. Anyhow, I got it to work out eventually, but if you guys have any better solutions for me, please drop it down in the comments. I'm always curious if you guys have better solutions for my problems than I do. Cheers. Now here was another weird measurement issue I came across. I was trying to get all four legs to a proper bench height, so I put it on my workbench and measured from the top of the seat up the leg. I initially had the idea that I could just strike it on one leg and transfer the line to the opposing leg. However, that ended up creating an inconsistency that was pretty vast, almost a ½ inch. So alternatively, I went ahead and just measured up from the bottom of all four legs. I ended up moving the workpiece to my table saw surface since that was a guaranteed flat surface as opposed to my workbench, which was at this point long overdue for a flattening. Since I want to use holdfasts to be able to secure work to the bench, I'll need to add some additional blocking to the underside to allow the holdfast to have something to grip onto. 3 inches in thickness tends to be a good number for holdfast use, which allows enough material for the holdfast to distend slightly and grip securely. I'll glue the blocking onto the bottom, and instead of using a clamp to hold it in place, use some 2-inch exterior screws as temporary clamps, and then once the glue is cured, go back with Miller dowels to plug the screw holes. Practically speaking, the dowels aren't really necessary since you're going to have plenty of face grain to face grain glue surface, but since I didn't want to have screws that could possibly start poking up after a flattening, or God forbid hit a chisel edge that penetrates the surface of the bench, the Miller dowel is a useful alternative. It's also worth noting that a depth stop, even a piece of tape, would be helpful here. I was kind of rushing at this point and of course drilled directly through my workpiece and right into my workbench surface. Now a track saw here is extremely helpful to trim the legs down to final length. If you don't have a track saw, I'm really sorry, they're great. Just an indispensable tool in my opinion. But this can either be done by hand or using a circular saw and a speed square. You just want to make sure if you're going the circular saw route to set your blade to the corresponding angle. From an engineering perspective, I don't want all the stress to be at the dovetail joint where it meets the workbench surface, so a support between the legs will maintain that angle and add another point of support, as well as create a place for a stretcher to land to prevent racking in a forward and backward direction. And since we already discussed my trust issues with CA glue and blue tape, which I largely ignore, usually because I seem to go back to it every couple of videos, I'm going to use some double stick tape here to set up some fences for the bearing on a flush trim to ride. That'll allow me to perfectly notch out a space for the support, which will then be glued and mounted with a Miller dowel. The dog holes for the bench will all be cut with a 3/4 inch spade bit. I'm using these Speed Demon spade bits from Diablo that I was supplied as part of the Home Depot Perspective. The ideal spacing that I learned from Christopher Schwarz's books is about 4 inches, and I'll walk that off with dividers, punch, and then drill. For the most part, I eyeball these to 90 degrees and use a speed square off to the side as a visual alignment aid. You don't necessarily need them to be a perfectly 90 degrees, but you also don't want them off by more than 1 or 2 degrees, otherwise it's super awkward to use. So having an alignment aid handy always helps. The bird's mouth is then cut with the track saw, and this is for creating a little sawing area, and I'll demonstrate how that works later in the video. The north-south stretcher, so to speak, is just going to have a lap joint cut on either end, and it will be glued and clamped until cured. Finally, the top is flattened. I've been a little lazy about making winding sticks, so I'm using these 2 pieces of right angle aluminum. They work, but I do need to paint some contrasting lines along the top edges to make it a little easier to sight. The nice thing about right angle aluminum in this regard is that because it's extruded, it's perfectly straight and you don't have to worry about wood movement or any potential warping unless you're dropping them quite aggressively around your shop. Japanese carpenters often use nail heads as a plane stop. Since I want something retractable, I'm going to go with a couple of screws to do the same purpose. The location can vary for you depending on if you're a push or a pull plane user. So when Jonathan first started the Katz-Moses Woodworkers with Disabilities Fund, he was presented with the problem of work holding. People with physical limitations have trouble securing things comfortably and working comfortably, which limits them in their enjoyment of woodworking and creating in general. This project aims to link up those in our community with the ability to give with those who need to receive, and empower everyone to positive change in giving. It's my hope that with this project, which allows users to secure their work in a variety of ways and to work in a seated, comfortable position, either in a shop or even on a porch, that more people, regardless of ability or disposition, will be able to gain confidence and satisfaction from working with wood. Because no matter who you are, working your wood always puts a smile on your face. Thanks for watching, and see you next time here at Cowdog Craftworks.